Armenia and Azerbaijan came this close to war again, and yet again, everyone was silent. The latest trouble actually started in May of this year, when Azerbaijani soldiers first crossed into internationally recognized Armenian territory and occupied 16 square miles into Armenia. Then in July, you had clashes on another part of the shared border. And most recently, Azerbaijan launched a military operation that the EU said was the worst violation so far of a ceasefire agreement the two sides created last year. Not that the US government seems to understand this, by the way, since the State Department put out a statement that was like, "We're concerned." Nobody knows what that means. And we call on everybody to stop fighting. Except one side, that's Azerbaijan, kind of trespassed and started shooting, so, we now look like morons. Now, the fighting stopped pretty quickly, but you had deaths on both sides, and at least 13 Armenian soldiers were taken by the Azerbaijani military as prisoners of war. And the reason I'm talking to you about this is because our collective silence helps fuel Azerbaijan's aggression and human rights abuse against Armenian soldiers. So the Russians are now mediating peace talks between both sides, and apparently they're going well. But I personally wouldn't put my life in Russia's hands, so it'd be nice if the international community spoke up louder. Luckily, I got to talk to Armenia's human rights defender, an ad hoc judge in the European Court of Human Rights, Arman Tatoyan, and we spoke about his daily fight for human rights, how Armenians continue to face hatred, and why it's so bad that the international community is basically ignoring this problem.
Hi, Arman. Thank you so much for joining me on Oh My World. It means so much.
Thank you very much for your invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is mine. The pleasure is mine. It's not every day that you get someone whose official title is human rights defender. I mean, that is an amazing thing to be. Thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with the news of late. While I have you, which is really fortunate timing for us, you had escalation along the Armenian-Azerbaijan border last week, and a ceasefire has been declared. And I understand that at least 13 prisoners of war have been taken, if not more. And I imagine that a big part of your job is fighting for the human rights of these prisoners, ensuring that they're humanely treated, obviously hoping that they get released. Can you tell us a little bit about that fight, how that's going, and how you understand things to be for these prisoners?
Well, the escalation was on November 16, and on that very day, 13 Armenian military servicemen were captured by Azerbaijani armed forces. According to official statistics, there are 13 prisoners of war, but apparently our fact-finding mission proves that there are more people, so we are trying now to find out. And I have to say that before this escalation, during the 44-day war, Azerbaijani armed forces captured several hundreds of Armenian military servicemen and civilians. Some of them were killed. Some of them are considered missing, and there were more than 100, about 150, officially approved by Azerbaijan. 108 are returned already, and still 40 prisoners of war were in Azerbaijan. So it's like now we have 40, according to official statistics, 40 plus 13, and more, of course. And the main issue is, as you very rightly mentioned, the protection of their rights, so that they are treated. They are not treated inhumanely. Unfortunately, all of them who returned, they testified that they were subject to severe torture, cruelties, and apparently they live there under threat for their lives, real threats, and I have to say constant ill treatment and torture. Not only beatings, but humiliations, not intentionally not providing medical assistance, etc.
I see. It's just heartbreaking to hear this. And how do you go about that fight? I mean, how do you try to ensure that these prisoners are treated somewhat humanely?
Well, we work with international organizations. The first, let's say, international organization that is the most engaged in this process is the International Committee of the Red Cross. And we do work with ICRC, our Armenian delegation, and they have access to them. Though I have to say that Azerbaijan always tries to hinder their access to our prisoners of war, but still they have some access. And this is the only organization basically on the ground that has access. We also work with other international organizations such as United Nations, Council of Europe, European Union, etc., and other countries' governments as well, such as United States of America. The only problem is that Azerbaijani authorities refuse to release them. According to international humanitarian law, after the cessation of hostilities, every party must release immediately and repatriate prisoners of war, any civilian captive, because this is the rule. This is the rule of the war. But unfortunately, Azerbaijan continues to keep them, by launching artificial trials, investigations, showing to the world that they are busy with processes and the delays are connected with these investigations. But all of these things are fake and falsified because it is not permissible under any international rule to launch any investigation against prisoners of war, and they should have been immediately released. And I have to say that Armenian prisoners of war are also used for bargaining purposes to get political and military benefits. And here we have clear trafficking in human beings, according to all international standards.
I see. Well, so listen, you touched upon a point I think that I'd like to expand upon, which is the general way Azerbaijan is hindering processes, treating Armenians in general. What is your biggest concern in terms of how the government of Azerbaijan is going about this issue, going about the relationship between Azerbaijan and Armenia in the world of human rights, right? I mean, when that theme park was launched and announced earlier this year in Baku, it was horrifying, right? And so can you unpack that a little bit for us as to what your biggest concern is and what is fueling the issues in terms of human rights abuse from Azerbaijan toward Armenia?
Thank you for this very important question. The only source of all these violations, atrocities, cruelties, is the genocidal policy of the authorities of Azerbaijan against Armenians in general, not only Armenia and Artsakh, but Armenians worldwide. And this genocidal policy is based on two main pillars. This is the ethnic ground and religious ground. And by saying genocidal policy, I mean the policy of state-sponsored hatred and animosity towards Armenians. This policy is institutional. It has been carried out for decades, and even generations are filled with this hatred. And this hatred resulted in ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. Now around borders of the Republic of Armenia, almost every day, gross human rights violations, massive violations are taking place. This morning, an Armenian soldier was killed by Azerbaijani armed forces right before our conversation. And again, this is connected with this policy because Azerbaijani soldiers, where they are now located in many parts on the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia, most importantly, next to the villages, in the very vicinity, in the closest vicinity of villages of Armenia and on the roads, they pose real threat to civilians. And our soldiers there are to protect lives and health and peace and security of these people. That is why from the very outset, all the activities of Azerbaijani authorities, their military are unlawful, since the basis is very clear. This is the genocidal policy. And in all of these locations where they are now present, they appeared as a result of threats for the new war. And according to international legal system, international jurisprudence, forcing countries to do something or threats of war or reaching results under threats of war is illegitimate. And this is an absolute international requirement.
You know, it's funny, if there's anything I learned in the 12 years I was in the US government, it's that not enough attention is paid to when you have communities or governments leading the charge on fueling hatred and instilling that in a generation, how that ends up playing out to cause conflict, to cause human rights abuse, and how you could try and get at it from the root.
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking to me because it's people don't pay enough attention to it until a genocide actually happens or until the abuse actually happens. And so that gets me to my last point, which is about the international community. How do you feel that they have been involved in helping you in your cause? Are they helping you enough? If not, what should they be doing and who should be helping lead on this issue?
The international community during this war and after the war is, I have to say, the reaction is very disproportionate. In many cases, the international community is silent. Unfortunately, there is always equivalence between Armenia and Azerbaijan when reacting to all the realities. This is another problem. But I have to say that international community, other countries of the world must realize that this atmosphere of animosity between Armenians and Azerbaijanis that the Azerbaijani authorities are carrying out is dangerous also for them. Why? Because in this policy keeps the atmosphere of animosity between the two nations in the whole world. And there are many countries where Armenians and Azerbaijanis live together. This resulted during the war. There were already several examples in the United States of America when Armenian churches, Armenian schools were vandalized and clashes were even between the two nations. 2 days ago, I visited San Francisco with the assistance of ANCA Western Region, and we visited the Armenian church, which was set on fire during the war, and the Armenian school, which was vandalized. These are clear evidence. This is clear evidence of results, of consequences of this Azerbaijanophobia. So that is why this policy is dangerous, not only for that region, Caucasian region, let's say, and the international community may think, this is some region that is far away from us, so we can be calm in our countries. No, Azerbaijani authorities, due to this policy, can easily play with the stability of these countries, human rights systems of these countries. And we experience the same problems, not only in the United States of America, but in France, in Germany, in Russia, in some other countries. And even it generates, unfortunately, hatred and animosity, tensions between not only Armenians and Azerbaijanis, but Armenians and Turkish people even, because this policy is basically has the same grounds. And Armenians and Azerbaijanis, for example, who live in the United States, in other countries, they, in most cases, they're citizens of these countries. So it means that these countries even cannot deport them. And what they have to do, just to stuck with dealing hate crimes. Because here we have only hate crimes. These are crimes based on ethnic and religious grounds. That is why international community must respond to this, having in mind also that there are already examples that this policy is a real threat to the democracies and human rights of other countries as well.
And so what specifically would you like to see? If you could right now give a message to everyone on kind of a playbook or specific issues that the international community could do to help protect Armenians and their human rights and ensure that hate crimes like this don't happen, what specifically would you like to see?
Well, first thing is, of course, liability. Is the liability, accountability of those who are spewing hatred, who are spreading hatred. Otherwise, this policy will not stop. Because this policy has a history of decades, history of so many years, and it is so deeply rooted. And this is one of the ways to keep away their own nation from their own problems and to keep them in Armenophobia, which is also used for internal and external political purposes. That is why number one issue is this one, is the liability. And here I mean specifically political liability of authorities, but I also refer to criminal liability of all the perpetrators who committed crimes, cruelties, torture, inhuman treatment, beheadings alive, which were, by the way, very highly encouraged by the authorities, since these soldiers were, Azerbaijani soldiers were with open faces, acting openly, cynically, by this demonstrating their impunity, and even knowing that they will get only glorification from their authorities. This is the most important thing. And when it comes to Armenian borders, we're proposing creation of a security zone, which entails removal of Azerbaijani armed forces from the immediate locations, vicinity of our villages, so that human rights of our civilians, not soldiers, not military, but civilians, regular citizens who can restore their rights and can live, can breathe, and at least for their children, for their generations, until this issue is settled.
Right, I see that. Yes, accountability is really everything, right? Going after those who've committed crimes, persecution, accountability, because it prevents future behavior.
Exactly. Impunity leads to new violations and severe crimes even.
Exactly. Well, Arman, it was a pleasure to have you. I'm so grateful for this insight, and I really thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Hagar, for this very important interview conversation and your professional questions.
Thank you, and good luck with this work.
Thank you.